Hello again, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our academic research writing series. This is what I like to call the moment of truth. Today, we are talking about chapters 4 and 5 of your thesis, the results, the discussion, the conclusions, and finally, the oral defense. Now, why do I call this the moment of truth? Because up to this point, in chapters 1, 2, and 3, you were only planning. You were proposing what you intended to do. But now, your research has actually happened. You have collected real data, and the question is, what does it all mean? This is where you transform raw data into what we call actionable knowledge. This is where numbers and observations become something that can influence policy, help communities, or guide future researchers. So today, we will walk through how to present your findings clearly, how to interpret them with intellectual honesty, how to conclude with confidence, and how to defend everything in front of a panel. Let us begin. Before we go into the details, I want you to see the big picture. Your entire thesis is divided into two major phases. Look carefully at the slide. Phase 1 is the proposal, which covers chapters 1, 2, and 3. In the previous modules, we spent a lot of time on this phase. The focus here is on what you plan to do, and very importantly, the tense you use is the future tense. You write will be used, will be conducted, will be analyzed. Why? Because at that stage, the research has not happened yet. Phase 2 is the report, which covers chapters 4 and 5. This is what we are discussing today. The focus here shifts to what you found and what it means. And the tense also shifts. Now you use the past tense. You write was used, was conducted, was analyzed. This is because the research has already been completed. Now please read the note at the bottom of the slide carefully. Chapters 4 and 5 occupy the final position in your research structure. This is where the value of your research is ultimately realized. All the hard work you put into chapters 1, 2, and 3 was preparation. Chapters 4 and 5 are the payoff. This is where your thesis either becomes meaningful or it falls flat. So please, give these chapters the attention they deserve. Let us now look at how chapter 4 and chapter 5 differ from each other. Many students confuse the two, so I want to make the distinction very clear. Look at the table on the slide. Chapter 4 is the results and discussion. Its core question is simple. What did the data show and what does it mean? The core tools you use here are tables, statistical reporting, and connections back to the literature you reviewed in Chapter 2. Chapter 5 is the summary, conclusions, and recommendations. Its core question is different. It asks, so what? What should we do about it? The core tools here are synthesized statements, logical deductions, and specific action plans. Do you see the difference? Chapter 4 is backward looking. It reports what happened during your research and explains what it means. Chapter 5 is forward looking. It takes the meaning from Chapter 4 and turns it into action. Here is a simple way to remember it. In Chapter 4, you are a reporter explaining the news. In Chapter 5, you are a consultant recommending what to do next. These are two different roles and they require two different styles of writing. Do not mix them up. Now let us zoom into chapter 4 itself. Even within this one chapter, there are two distinct parts that you must keep separate, the results and the discussion. Look at the slide. On the left, the results section is labeled as fact. This section is objective, descriptive, and statistical. It directly answers your specific research questions using empirical data. You are simply presenting what the numbers show, nothing more. You do not interpret, you do not explain why, you do not argue, you just report. On the right, the discussion section is labeled as meaning. This section is interpretive and contextual. It explains the why behind your results and it explicitly connects your findings back to the existing literature from chapter 2. This is where you say things like, these findings are consistent with the study of Garcia 2020, which also found, or however, unlike Santos 2021, our results showed. Now, please pay attention to the strategic insight at the bottom of the slide. A study by Penrose and Katz 2010 found that the discussion section is the part of a research paper most frequently criticized by thesis panels. Let me repeat that. The discussion is the most criticized section. Why? Because many students rush through it, or they just repeat what they already said in the results. Mastery of the discussion section is highly valuable, and it can be the difference between an average thesis and an excellent one. In Chapter 4, you will almost certainly use tables to present your data. So let us talk about how to format a table properly using APA style. Look at the example on the slide. There are 5 important elements you need to remember. First, the table number. It should be in bold, flush left, and written as Table 1, Table 2, and so on. Not Table number 1, just Table 1. Second, the table title. It should be italicized, flush left, and written as a concise descriptive title, placed on the line directly below the table number. For example, mean scores of cybercrime awareness by educational attainment. Third, the borders. This is a common mistake. APA tables use horizontal borders only. There should be a line at the top, a line under the column headers, and a line at the bottom of the table. That is all. No vertical lines, no grid lines. If your table looks like a spreadsheet with all the boxes drawn, you need to remove them. Fourth, the data body. All decimal numbers should be aligned by the decimal point. So 4.12 should line up directly with 3.41. This makes the table easier to read. And fifth, the notes. General notes and specific notes go below the table. If you are indicating statistical significance, you write note, followed by the relevant information, such as p less than 0.05. These formatting rules may seem small, but your panel and external readers will notice. A properly formatted table communicates professionalism, a messy table communicates carelessness. Now let us talk about how to build a defensible discussion section. Remember, this is the part most criticized by panels, so you need to do this well. There are 5 steps, 5 pillars you should follow. Look at the slide. Step 1 is interpret. You must explain exactly what the statistical results mean in context. Do not just say the mean was 4.12. Say what a 4.12 means for your study. Is that a high level, a low level? What does it indicate about your population? Step 2 is connect. You must relate your findings back to the studies you reviewed in Chapter 2. Do your results agree with what previous researchers found? Do they contradict earlier studies? Either way, make the connection explicit. Step 3 is explain. You must honestly address any unexpected or surprising findings. Did something happen that you did not predict? Do not hide it. Address it. Suggest possible reasons. Step 4 is acknowledge. You must explicitly list the constraints and limitations of your study. Maybe your sample size was small. Maybe there were certain biases you could not eliminate. Being transparent about limitations does not weaken your study. In fact, it demonstrates intellectual honesty, which your panel will respect. Step 5 is implicate. You must state the real world impact of your findings. What do they mean for theory, for practice, for policy? This is what makes your research matter beyond the pages of your thesis. If your discussion hits all 5 of these pillars, you will have a strong, defensible chapter. Now, let me warn you about 4 common errors that students make in Chapter 4 and how to fix them. Look at the slide carefully. The first error is mixing results and discussion. Many students throw everything into one long paragraph, jumping between reporting data and interpreting it. The fix is simple. Use clear subheadings. Present the factual finding first, cleanly and without interpretation. Then, in a separate paragraph or section, interpret it. The second error is what I call the orphan table. This happens when a student inserts a table into the chapter but never refers to it in the text. The table just sits there, alone, unexplained. The fix is to reference every table by its number in the text and to narrate the key takeaway. For example, as shown in Table 3, college educated respondents scored higher on cybercrime awareness compared to high school only respondents. The third error is overclaiming. This happens when students claim causation based on correlation. Just because 2 things are related does not mean one causes the other. The fix is to use hedging language. Use words like suggests or may indicate or appears to be associated with rather than stronger words like causes or proves. Be careful with your language. The fourth error is failing to connect to literature. Some students write a discussion section without referencing any of the studies from Chapter 2. That breaks the logic of the whole thesis. The fix is to ask yourself after every major finding, which studies from my literature review relate to this? Then explicitly cite them and explain the connection. Now let us move to Chapter 5. This chapter has 3 distinct tiers, and each one builds on the previous one. Look at the slide. Tier 1 is the summary of findings. This is the factual layer. You restate the specific answers based on your data. And here is the crucial rule. You introduce no new data and no new sources at this stage. Everything you say here must have already appeared in Chapter 4. If it is a new finding, it does not belong here. Tier 2 is the conclusions. This is the interpretation layer. You write generalized statements that are logically derived from your findings, but you must be careful. Do not exceed the scope of your data. If you studied one barangay, do not make claims about the entire country. Stay within the boundaries of what your data can actually support. Tier 3 is the recommendations. This is the action layer. You write concrete, actionable suggestions, and these recommendations must be directed at specific named stakeholders. Do not say, society should do more. Say, the Department of Education should implement, or barangay officials should conduct. The more specific you are, the more useful your recommendations become. These three tiers must flow logically. Each one builds on the one before it. If your summary is wrong, your conclusions will be wrong, and your recommendations will be useless. So get the foundation right. Let me show you a concrete example of how these three tiers work in practice. Look at the slide. At the top, we have the summary, which is the factual layer. It states, awareness of cybercrime among rural residents was moderate, with a mean score of 0.52. Notice that this is just a restatement of a finding, no interpretation yet. In the middle, we have the conclusion, which is the interpretation layer. It states current information dissemination channels are inadequate for reaching populations most vulnerable to cybercrime. Notice the shift. This is not in the data itself. It is a logical deduction drawn from the moderate awareness score. The researcher is saying, if awareness is only moderate, then the channels being used to spread information must not be working well enough. At the bottom, we have the recommendation, which is the action layer. It states local government units, or LGUs, should implement targeted barangay seminars for residents with secondary education or below. Notice how specific this is. It names the stakeholder, the LGUs, it names the action, targeted seminars, and it names the audience, residents with secondary education or below. Please pay attention to the nuance warning at the bottom. Notice the shift from a factual restatement to a logical deduction to a specific targeted action. That is the flow you are aiming for. If your chapter 5 does not move through these three stages cleanly, it needs more work. Now let us shift to the oral defense. This is where you present your thesis to the panel, usually in about 15 to 20 minutes. The panel will then ask you questions. This is the most important performance of your academic life so far, so you need to prepare properly. Look at the slide. It shows you a suggested time allocation for a typical defense presentation. Introduction, meaning chapter 1, should take 3 to 4 minutes. Literature review, chapter 2, should take 2 to 3 minutes. Methodology, chapter 3, should take 3 to 4 minutes. Results, chapter 4, should take 4 to 5 minutes. And conclusions, chapter 5, should take 2 to 3 minutes. Do you notice something? The results section gets the most time. That makes sense because this is where your actual contribution lives. The earlier chapters are context, the results are the substance. Now read the note at the bottom of the slide. The oral defense is the spoken counterpart of research writing. It tests whether you truly understand your methodology and your findings. That is a very important point. The defense is not about reading your slides out loud. It is about demonstrating that you own your research, that you understand it deeply. If you have to read everything from your slides, the panel will immediately know that the work is not really yours. Now let us talk about how your slides should look during the defense. Look at the comparison on the slide. On the left, you see a not that example. It shows slides that are overloaded with text, paragraph after paragraph, dense and difficult to read. Please, do not do this. If your slides look like a textbook, your panel will stop listening to you and start reading your slides instead. You lose their attention. On the right, you see a do this example. It shows slides that are visual and concise. You see core findings, implications, and actions clearly displayed, supported by a simple chart. Now let me walk you through 4 important design principles at the bottom of the slide. First, the 6 bag 6 rule. Each slide should have a maximum of 6 lines, and each line should have a maximum of 6 words. This forces you to be concise. Second, the visual anchor. Use charts, diagrams, or icons as the primary focus of each slide, not long paragraphs of text. A good visual communicates faster than 100 words. Third, typography. Use a minimum of 24 points for body text and 32 points for titles. Use sans serif fonts like Arial or Calibri. They are easier to read on a projector. Fourth, navigation. Always number your slides. This is essential when the panel asks questions during the Q&A. They will say things like, "Can you go back to slide 7?" If your slides are not numbered, you will waste precious time scrolling. Now, let us talk about how you should actually deliver your defense. Look at the 4 principles on the slide. The first is eye contact. Speak directly to the panel. Your slides are behind you, not your audience. The slides are a visual aid, not a script. If you keep turning around to read your slides, you are signaling to the panel that you are lost. Face them, talk to them, make eye contact. The second is timing. Practice with a timer until you can consistently finish your presentation 2 minutes under the limit. If the limit is 20 minutes, aim for 18. Exceeding the time limit signals poor preparation and lack of respect for the panel's schedule. Respect the clock. The third is poise. When the panel asks you a difficult question, pause briefly before answering. A 1 or 2 second pause communicates thoughtfulness, not ignorance. Students often panic and start talking immediately, and they stumble. A brief pause gives you time to think and respond clearly. The fourth is honesty. This is very important. If the panel asks a question you do not know the answer to, do not pretend. Do not invent an answer. You can say something like, "That is an excellent question that our study did not address. It is a valuable direction for future research." That response shows honesty and intellectual maturity. Your panel will respect you far more for admitting a limit than for faking an answer. Now, let us address a very important topic for this generation of researchers: the ethical use of AI during the results, discussion, and conclusion stages of your thesis. Look at the slide. It presents 3 key ideas inside what I call the AI integrity lock. The first is the danger. AI does not know your context, your respondents, or the nuances of your data. It has never met the people you interviewed. It has never seen your barangay. It cannot feel the culture of your community. If you outsource the interpretation of your data to AI, you are undermining the core competency of a researcher. Interpretation is your job. It is what makes you a researcher, not a data collector. The second is the cardinal rule: never ever fabricate data or simulate research outcomes using AI. This is the worst form of academic dishonesty. If your panel discovers that any of your data was invented or generated by AI, your thesis will be rejected and the consequences for your academic record can be severe. Your data must come from your actual respondents, no exceptions. The third is the accountability test. Before including any sentence in chapters 4 or 5, ask yourself, can I explain the data, the analysis, and the reasoning behind this sentence to my thesis panel? If the answer is no, remove it. This test applies to every single sentence. Do not include anything you cannot defend. Look at the slide. This image summarizes your entire research journey in 5 stages, like climbing a staircase. Let me walk you through it. The first step is the gap, which comes from chapters 1 and 2. Here, you identified the research problem. This is where your journey began. The second step is the method, which is chapter 3. Here, you designed how you would collect the data. The third step is the evidence, which is chapter 4. Here, you reveal the factual results of your study. The fourth step is the action, which is chapter 5. Here, you synthesize your conclusions and offer recommendations. And the fifth and final step is the podium, the oral defense. Here, you defend the unbroken narrative of your evidence based discovery. Notice the phrase unbroken narrative. That is the key idea. From the gap you identified, through the method, through the evidence, through the action, all the way to the podium, your story must be connected. Each chapter flows into the next. If there is a break somewhere, if your results do not match your method, or if your conclusions do not match your results, the panel will find it. So your job is to make sure the narrative stays unbroken from start to finish. And finally, we arrive at the last slide, the final checklist. This is your sign off before you walk into the defense room. Let me walk you through all three columns. Under Chapter 4, ask yourself, are your tables APA formatted and referenced in the text? Are unexpected findings discussed honestly? Are study limitations explicitly acknowledged? Under Chapter 5, ask yourself, does your summary introduce zero new data? Are your conclusions logical deductions rather than simple data restatements? Are your recommendations actionable and directed at specific stakeholders? And under defense readiness, ask yourself, do your slides follow the 6-6 rule? Have you practiced your delivery with a timer? Are you prepared to explain the reasoning behind every sentence without relying on AI? If you can confidently answer yes to every single one of these questions, then you are ready. You're ready to walk into that defense room with your head held high because you know your research, you own your findings, and you can defend every word you wrote. And that brings us to the end of our three-part series on academic research writing. We have walked through the entire journey from identifying a research gap to designing a methodology to collecting and interpreting data, and finally, to defending your work in front of a panel. Remember this, everyone. A thesis is not just a requirement for graduation. It is your first real contribution to knowledge. It is your first step as a scholar. Do it with honesty, do it with care, and do it with pride. Thank you for listening and good luck with your defenses. I will see you at the podium.